So this is the part where we discuss the portion that the message that we just heard. And I do recommend, I'm going to send it out, and I really recommend that we listen to it again, because there were so many teachings in this. I made a few notes. Even I listened to it during the week, and I transposed it. I typed it all out, and I even saw how I missed some things when I listened again. Somebody sent me a recording this week by a rabbi who's talking about Jacob and Esau. And he said he had a comment from somebody who said to him, how could Jacob, who was a twin of his brother Esau, how could he have refused to give him a bowl of lentil soup? Why did he trick him into giving him the birthright? Why was he so mean? And then he said, well, it's because Abraham had died, and Jacob went to the funeral, and he was now preparing the lentil stew, which was part of the food that you serve to the mourners. And so he was the one who was in the house. He was the one doing everything. He was the one who cared about, the future of Israel. But Esau wasn't even there at the Shiva. He was outside somewhere, up to no good. And then when he came in, it was late and he was starving. Where did they get these stories? It had nothing to do with what the Torah says. It's dangerous for us, for any religion. Honestly, it's dangerous for us to add or take away from his words. He warns us over and over again not to do that, and yet we do. We keep doing that. And then when things don't go our way, we start crying. Why is this happening to us? We are being bombarded today on every front, not only physical things that are out there, our foods, all the networks, the rays, the iPhones, everything. We're being bombarded. We're being bombarded on an emotional level. The anxiety levels of people today have not been so high since the last war. And not only that, it's also on a spiritual level. We are being misled by most people who teach religions. I got another email today that talked about how a Muslim man was listening to some Christians who were talking about Jesus being God. And he said that he asked Allah to show him the truth. And so Allah pointed him to a place in the Quran that spoke about how he would find the truth in the Bible. So to him, I guess the Bible was the Christian Bible. And so he said, yes, this was the creator. It was a little more complicated than what I'm saying now, but it's so hard to know who to listen to, who to believe. Even when we read the Torah itself, which we do every week, during the week in our community, both in Spanish and in English, we read these words, and it really depends upon our interpretation. But remember, God spoke to his people. He spoke to us, the people standing at Mount Sinai, in a very simple way, in a simple language. He wasn't speaking to a bunch of scholars. He wasn't speaking to PhDs. He was speaking to people who had been slaves in Egypt for, we don't know exactly how many years, but for a long time, long enough to have taken on the beliefs of their oppressor. We had been living in Egypt. So these stories come from that. There are so many things that Rabbi spoke about. He spoke about relationships. You can't know another person unless you spend a lot of time with them. We think we know somebody. We think we know our husbands and our wives, but to tell you the truth, we can never really know them 100%. We don't even know ourselves. The only one who knows us is the God who created us. He talked about our calling. The role of is our calling. Jacob had a calling. Esau didn't. It was obvious from his behavior. And what is our calling? That's so important to look at. It talks about, did Rivka and Isaac have a good relationship? Did Rivka trust Isaac? I don't know, maybe Isaac was such a quiet man, a peaceful man, one who, went on his way and really, maybe Rebecca said to him, do this, Isaac. And Isaac thought about it. How many people do we know who just think about it but never go ahead and do it? Isaac, during the 20 years that Rebecca was barren, we don't see Isaac once going to the God who he knew. He knew Abraham's God, but this was the beginning. They knew him as El Shaddai. El Shaddai means a nurturer, a breastfeeder. He nourished the early people who were following him. He gave them everything. They didn't really know him yet. So Isaac didn't even go and pray for Rebecca to have a child. It was Rebecca who bugged him, and finally he pleaded, and she got pregnant. But who was it that these twins in her womb were fighting and struggling against each other? Who was it who went to ask of God? Why was she the one to go? Remember, she came from a pagan culture. She came from the Arameans that Abraham was told to leave because they had many gods. So one of the gods that she would have gone to were the fertility goddesses. So she was the one who would be used to doing that. But this time she couldn't go to them because she was learning about Isaac's God, Abraham's God. So she spoke to God, and God gave her a prophecy. 2 nations are in your womb. One will serve the other. We're not sure which, although it's translated as the older will serve the younger. And one will be mightier than the other. So we think we know which one's which, but do we? Here, Isaac, who was not the mighty warrior, he was the one chosen. Jacob, Jacob, who was not the mighty warrior, he loved to stay home and cook. He stayed in the tents. He watched his livestock. It was Esau who was the mighty warrior. No wonder his father would have chosen him. Just made sense. But they hadn't learned yet. It's not by power. It's not by might, but by my spirit, says the Lord. And if anyone battles with that every single day, it's me. I sometimes feel like I'm in a war against my own thoughts, a war against the past, a war against all these people who are doing things that go so contrary to the Torah. It's like I want to get up and fight, but it's not my fight, because then I get sick when I can't solve anything. It's God's fight. And we just have to listen. One of the things I'm always telling myself is these stories are so real in our lives. We can learn from our forefathers. I can learn from Sarah. Don't run ahead of God. God is the one who knows, who knew what was going to happen. And Rebecca too, she ran ahead of God. She devised a way that Jacob would deceive his father. And Rabbi said here, even if God had blessed Esau, would have that made a difference at who he chose? See, we are not in control. He's the one in control. So again, I recommend listen to Rabbi's messages again. Listen to every word, because let me tell you, there's so many things that we can learn from this. He said, let me see what else there was. Yeah, he knew that his son was going to, if he watched the Philistines at the time digging up, stopping up the wells and fighting with them. It was so ridiculous, because they were fighting, they were cutting off their nose to spite their faces. They could have used those wells. You see the same thing today with the modern day Philistines, which we call the Palestinians. What are they doing? When they were given the land, when Ariel Sharon kicked our people out of Gaza, and our people who had been there had built factories and farms and wonderful things. What did they do? They burnt everything. They stop up the wells. They're still doing the same thing that they did then. And how is that going to help them or anyone? Oh, my goodness. Let's see. What does it say? In a relationship, he talks about relationships. If one person is afraid of the other, it is not a relationship. And I know that very well. If we've chosen a spouse, if you have chosen a wife for the qualities that you think she has, and then she gives you advice and you refuse to even listen, how is she going to trust you? How is she going to develop a relationship with you when time and time again you don't listen? We need to be open. And even if she's wrong, you stand up and you say, I don't believe you're right, and give the reasons. But if she's right and you follow, or if you think she's right and you follow it, ultimately you're responsible. In other words, we can ask people for advice, which I do now. As I'm getting older, I ask for advice. I may not take it, but that's my responsibility, and I will be responsible for my decision. The men are the head of the home. It is so important as the head of the home to listen to your wife and to decide what is right and what is wrong and stand firm. But remember, the responsibility will be yours. And what else? He said so many things. So, but the bottom line is to remember, we are human. Our forefathers, these stories are not about superheroes. They all made mistakes, and we all make mistakes every single day. If you think you don't, you're unteachable. If you know that you do, you are teachable. And that's what God wants from us. A spirit, a soul that is willing to listen to the advice of others who may have made the biggest mistakes. They're the ones who have learned the most in this life. It's not always the education that you have, but the experiences that we've had that teach us the most in life. And may we be able to pass these experiences on to our family, to our friends, and let us not be afraid to speak the truth when we see it. So I want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for spending the Shabbat with us. And God willing, we'll see you again next Shabbat. Have a wonderful day, and God bless you all.